What's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into something that ARMY has been waiting for since BTS announced their comeback. We're talking about Jimin's creative process for the Arirang album. And guys, what I'm about to share with you is going to blow your mind. This isn't just about how he recorded some vocals or learned choreography. We're talking about a complete artistic transformation that happened behind closed doors in Los Angeles. And thanks to director Bao and Wen's documentary, we finally get to see what really went down. So buckle up, hit that like button, and let's get into this incredible journey. Let me start by painting the picture of where Jimin was mentally when he first arrived in LA for the Arirang recording sessions. This was January 2026, just weeks after he and the other members had completed their mandatory military service. Now, for those who don't know, military service in Korea is no joke. It's intense, it's disciplined, and it completely removes you from your normal life for about 18 months. For someone like Jimin, who had spent over a decade living and breathing music and performance, this was a massive shift. The documentary opens with footage of Jimin at Incheon Airport, and you can see in his eyes this mixture of excitement and uncertainty. He's coming back to music, but he's also a different person now. The first few days in LA were dedicated to what the team called creative decompression. This is fascinating because usually when artists reunite for an album, they jump straight into writing and recording. But the BTS team, along with their creative directors and producers, made a conscious decision to give the members space to rediscover their artistic voices. For Jimin specifically, this meant spending hours in a private studio space that was set up almost like an artist's sanctuary. The documentary shows him sitting on the floor surrounded by notebooks, a guitar he was learning to play, various books about poetry and visual arts, and his laptop with folders full of voice memos he'd recorded during his military service. What's really interesting is that Jimin approached this album completely differently from how he approached his solo work on Face and Muse. Those albums were very much about expressing specific emotions and experiences that were immediate and raw. But with Arirang, he wanted to dig deeper into his identity as a Korean artist in a global context. The documentary captures him having this conversation with RM, where he talks about feeling like he's been performing for so long that sometimes he forgets to ask himself what he actually wants to say through his art. Not what people expect him to say, but what genuinely comes from his core. One of the most revealing moments in the documentary is when we see Jimin's creative journal. This isn't just lyrics or song ideas. It's filled with sketches, color palettes, Korean poetry, translations of Western poetry, photographs he'd taken, even pressed flowers and leaves. He explains in a voiceover that during his military service, he started thinking about art more holistically. He didn't want to just be a singer or a dancer anymore. He wanted to be a complete artist who could express ideas through multiple mediums and then synthesize all of that into his musical contributions. This is a level of artistic ambition that we hadn't really seen from Jimin before, and it shows a maturity that goes beyond just technical skill. The documentary then takes us into the actual songwriting process, and this is where things get really fascinating. Jimin didn't work alone. He collaborated with several songwriters and producers, but his approach was very specific. Instead of coming to sessions with finished lyrics or melodies, he would come with concepts and feelings. There's this incredible scene where he's working with a producer named Sarah Chen, who's known for her work with indie artists and has this very experimental approach to music production. Jimin brings in a recording he made on his phone of rain falling on a tin roof at the military base, and he tells Sarah that he wants to capture that feeling of being alone with your thoughts while everyone around you is asleep. Sarah starts playing with the rain sounds, layering them, pitching them, creating this atmospheric bed of sound. And then Jimin starts humming over it. Not words yet, just melodic ideas. The documentary shows this process happening over several hours, and what's remarkable is Jimin's patience with the creative process. In earlier behind-the-scenes content, we've seen Jimin be quite hard on himself, wanting things to be perfect immediately. But here, he's comfortable with the messiness of creation. He's okay with trying things that don't work, with sitting in silence for long periods just listening, with starting over multiple times. This particular session eventually evolved into one of the tracks on Arirang, though the documentary doesn't reveal which one. What it does show is how Jimin's military experience influenced his artistic process in unexpected ways. He talks about how in the military, you learn to find beauty and meaning in small moments because your daily life is so regimented. He would notice things like the way light came through the barracks window at dawn, or the rhythm of boots marching in formation, or the melody in his fellow soldiers' regional dialects. All of these observations made their way into his creative work for the album. Another fascinating aspect of Jimin's creative process that the documentary reveals is his collaboration with a visual artist named Kim Miho. Now, this isn't someone who's creating music video concepts or album covers. This is a fine artist who works primarily in installation and mixed media. Jimin reached out to him because he'd seen an exhibition that Kim did about the concept of Han, which is this uniquely Korean emotion that's difficult to translate but encompasses deep sorrow, longing, and resilience all at once. Jimin felt that this concept was central to what he wanted to express in Arirang, and he believed that working with a visual artist would help him understand how to translate that emotion into music. The documentary shows them in Kim's studio in Seoul during a break from recording. They're not talking about music at all. They're discussing color theory, the weight of different materials, how space and silence in visual art relates to space and silence in music. Kim shows Jimin a piece he's working on that uses traditional Korean paper and modern LED lights to create this effect where the past and present seem to exist in the same space simultaneously. Jimin is completely absorbed, taking videos, asking questions, and you can see his mind working, trying to figure out how to create that same effect sonically. This leads to one of the most innovative aspects of Jimin's contribution to Arirang. He became obsessed with the idea of layering traditional Korean musical elements with contemporary production in a way that didn't feel forced or like cultural tourism. The documentary shows him working with a JiminGeum player, which is a traditional Korean string instrument. But instead of just recording the JiminGeum and putting it in a track, Jimin spent days with the musician learning about the instrument's history, the emotions traditionally associated with different playing techniques, and the cultural context of the music. Then, in collaboration with the producer Marcus Williams, they developed this technique where they would record the JiminGeum, sample it, manipulate it electronically, and then have the musician respond to the manipulated version by playing over it. This created this conversation between traditional and modern, between Korea and the West, between Jimin's past and his present. Marcus says in the documentary that he'd never worked with an artist who was so thoughtful about cultural representation. Jimin wasn't just using Korean elements because it was trendy or because it would make the music sound unique. He was genuinely trying to honor his heritage while also pushing it into new territory. The documentary also reveals that Jimin was heavily involved in the conceptual framework for the entire album, not just his individual contributions. There are scenes of him in meetings with the other members and the creative team where they're discussing the narrative arc of Arirang. What's the story they're trying to tell? What does each track represent in that story? How do the musical styles and production choices support the emotional journey they want the listener to experience? Jimin is very vocal in these meetings, and you can see that his time away from the group has given him a new perspective and confidence in sharing his ideas. One particularly poignant moment in the documentary is when Jimin talks about writing lyrics. He's sitting in his hotel room in LA late at night, and he's struggling with a particular verse. He explains that he's trying to write about the feeling of coming home, but every time he writes something, it feels too simple or too cliché. He talks about how in Korean, there are so many words and expressions that capture specific types of longing and homecoming, but when he tries to translate those feelings into lyrics that will work in a song that will be heard globally, something gets lost. This leads him to make an interesting decision. Instead of trying to find perfect equivalents, he decides to write some sections in Korean using very specific, culturally rooted language, even if it means international listeners might not fully understand without translation. He talks about trusting that emotion transcends language, and that if he commits fully to the feeling, people will understand even if they don't know every word. This is a bold choice, and shows a new level of artistic confidence from Jimin. The documentary also shows us Jimin's physical preparation for the album, which might seem odd to mention in a discussion of creative process, but for Jimin, the physical and creative are deeply connected. We see him working with a vocal coach, but not in the way you might expect. They're not just doing scales and technical exercises. They're working on connecting breath to emotion, on how different physical states create different vocal colors. There's a session where Jimin sings the same phrase while walking, while lying down, while standing on one leg, exploring how each position changes the sound and feeling of his voice. Similarly, even though Arirang is primarily a vocal album without as much choreography as previous BTS releases, Jimin is shown working with a contemporary dancer. They're not creating dance routines. They're exploring movement as a way to understand music differently. The dancer has Jimin improvise movement to the demos of his tracks, and then they discuss what the movement revealed about the music. Did a section feel too rushed? Too stagnant? Were there emotional beats that the music was missing? This kind of interdisciplinary approach to music creation is not something we typically see in pop music production, and it shows how seriously Jimin takes his craft. Another revelation from the documentary is Jimin's intensive listening sessions. He created playlists of hundreds of songs across multiple genres and eras, everything from traditional Korean panzori to 90s R&B to contemporary experimental pop to classical compositions. But he wasn't just casually listening. The documentary shows him with a notebook, analyzing each song. What makes this melody memorable? How does this producer use silence? What emotional journey does this song take you on in 3 minutes? He's basically giving himself a masterclass in songwriting and production, and then applying those lessons to his work on Arirang. There's also a fascinating section about Jimin's collaboration with other members, particularly in writing sessions with RM and Suga. These scenes show a creative dynamic that's evolved significantly. In the past, there might have been more deference to the members who were established as the group's primary songwriters. But now, Jimin is bringing fully formed ideas and defending them, engaging in real creative debate. There's a scene where he and Suga have a disagreement about the bridge of a song. Suga wants it to be more minimal, Jimin wants to build it up. Instead of just deferring, Jimin makes his case, they try both versions, and ultimately they find a compromise that's better than either original idea. This equality in creative partnership shows how much Jimin has grown as an artist. The documentary also touches on something that fans have always been curious about, which is how Jimin deals with creative blocks and self-doubt. There's a very vulnerable moment where he's been working on a song for days and just can't get it right. He's frustrated, he's tired, and he's starting to spiral into negative self-talk. The cameras capture him calling his friend and fellow artist Taeyong from Big Bang. They have this long conversation where Taeyong talks about his own creative struggles and how sometimes you have to step away, trust the process, and remember why you started making music in the first place. After that conversation, Jimin takes 2 days off from the studio completely. He goes hiking in the hills around LA, he visits art museums, he sits in coffee shops and people watches. When he comes back to the studio, he approaches the problematic song completely differently. Instead of trying to force it to be something, he strips it down to its core, asking what is the one thing this song needs to say. Once he identifies that, everything else falls into place. This lesson in letting go and trusting the creative process is maybe one of the most valuable things the documentary reveals. Towards the end of the documentary section on Jimin's creative process, we see the moment when he listens to his completed tracks in the context of the full album for the first time. The emotion on his face is incredible. There's pride, certainly, but also this sense of relief and maybe a little surprise. He comments that he's never felt more like himself in a recording than he does in these Arirang tracks. He's not trying to be anything other than exactly who he is right now, with all his experiences, growth, contradictions, and complexities. And that authenticity is what makes the creative work so powerful. The documentary ends this section with Jimin talking directly to the camera about what he hopes listeners will take away from his contributions to Arirang. He says that he wants people to hear the journey, not just the destination. He wants them to hear the struggle and the breakthrough, the doubt and the confidence, the tradition and the innovation. He wants them to know that creating art is messy and hard and sometimes painful, but it's also the most meaningful thing he knows how to do. And that vulnerability, that willingness to show the full process and not just the polished result, is what makes Jimin's creative journey for Arirang so compelling and so inspiring. So there you have it, guys. That's the inside look at Jimin's creative process for the Arirang album. From conceptual development to collaboration to dealing with creative challenges, we got to see a side of Jimin's artistry that we've never had access to before. This documentary is going to be absolutely essential viewing for anyone who cares about music creation and artistic growth. Make sure you watch BTS, The Return, when it drops on Netflix on March 27th, because what I've shared today is just scratching the surface. Drop a comment below and let me know what aspect of Jimin's creative process you're most excited to learn more about. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.